What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Debates with Nav on the Right Way Sports Network. I'm your host, Pranav Sriraman. As always, make sure to go follow me on Instagram at Sports World Debate for the latest in-depth analysis on anything in the sports world, whether that is football, baseball, basketball, occasionally combat sports, or whatever you want is there. So make sure to go follow at Sports with Debates. And if you have any thoughts, comments, concerns about any one of my takes, on any one of my articles, any one of my videos, any one of my posts, make sure to go tweet me at SWDTweets1, and I'll get right back to you. So today is going to be a prediction video. What do I mean by that? We're going to predict how the NBA bubble is going to play out. The seedings, the rounds, the entire playoffs, all of that. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. We are going to start with the Eastern Conference, and for the seedings, I have the Milwaukee Bucks at the number 1 seed. Just fill them in. I think everyone at this point has the Milwaukee Bucks basically the 1 seed. I mean, there's 8 games left in the season, and they're 6.5 games ahead of the Raptors. They win 2 of those games in Orlando, and they already clinched the 1 seed. Or if they win 1 game and the Raptors lose 2, they clinch the 1 seed. So it's basically a clinch already for Milwaukee. Milwaukee is the number 1 seed. Let's move on to the number 2 seed. Number 2 seed, here's where things get interesting. I have the Boston Celtics taking the Toronto Raptors number 2 seed right now. The Toronto Raptors have the current number 2 seed at 46-18, but the Boston Celtics are only 3 games behind them at 43-21. And what makes me so certain that the Boston Celtics are going to overtake them for the number 2 seed is Boston has the 3rd easiest schedule in the league coming back from the hiatus. Meanwhile, Toronto has the 2nd hardest schedule returning from the hiatus. So I think when you fill that all up, I think Boston has a much easier chance to overtake Toronto than Toronto retaining that number 1 seed, because this season Toronto's done pretty poorly against teams above 500. They have a losing record in 10-14, and when you give them the 2nd hardest schedule, how am I supposed to expect them to win as many games as Boston does when Boston has a better record against winning teams and Boston has an easier schedule, held the 3rd easiest in the league and the 2nd easiest in the Eastern Conference. Moving on. Number 4 seed, I have the Philadelphia 76ers overtaking both the Indiana Pacers and the Miami Heat to get the number 4 seed, and here's why. The Philadelphia 76ers have struggled pretty much all season. They've had struggles with fit. They've had struggles with shooting. They've had struggles all around. They've had struggles outside the Wells Fargo Center, you name it. But they have the 2nd easiest schedule in the league behind New Orleans, and Miami has the hardest schedule in the league, that balances out, and they're only 2 games apart from each other. So I think with the strength of Miami's schedule combined with the easiness of Philadelphia's schedule, that also elevates Philadelphia to go past Miami in the standings. And the reason I picked the Pacers to be the lowest out of these 3 teams is their best player, when healthy, Victor Oladipo, has announced today, on Friday, July 3rd, Victor Oladipo announced that he will not be returning to Orlando, and that is huge for the Indiana Pacers. You could basically count them out at this point, but for the sake of standings, I have them falling to 6 because without Victor Oladipo, it's going to be very tough. I know they've been battling without him all season with Domantas Sabonis, Miles Turner, and all their role players. But at some point in time, when you don't have your star guard with you, your main guy, the going gets tough. And although the Pacers do have an easy schedule, I just don't see them being on the same level as Philadelphia in terms of talent and production. Moving on. At the number 7 seed, now these are the seeds that basically every year no one really cares about in the Eastern Conference because they don't really do anything. But for the number 7 seed, for the battle for the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, it comes down to Brooklyn, Orlando, and Washington. Washington is 6 games out of the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference currently, but it's a Bradley Beal show. And I predict Orlando will overtake Brooklyn, basically because Brooklyn has had several players that are sitting out of the hiatus. Kevin Durant has already been sitting out the entire season. Kyrie Irving does not want to return to play, and he's also been an advocate for no one to return to play because of his social justice movement, which I applaud. But DeAndre Jordan is also sitting out. Spencer Dinwiddie is sitting out. When you take all of that into consideration, how big of a weight that is. Their three of their four best players are sitting out for the restart. How do I really project the Brooklyn Nets to really do anything compared to Orlando, who's at home in a similar atmosphere, and they have a star-studded defense and they're healthy? So I have Orlando moving to the 7th seed, and the reason I have Washington overtaking Brooklyn for the 8th seed is because, again, you have Bradley Beal. I think Bradley Beal is good enough to will the Washington Wizards to above 2 games. I know John Wall is not returning. John Wall discussed that he was probably going to return, but I don't think he's going to return, and Bradley Beal can get them within 2 games. Right now, they're about 6 games behind for the play-in tournament. If he gets them within 2 games, I think Bradley Beal can easily beat Brooklyn by himself. So, moving on to the Western Conference. The Western Conference, I have the Los Angeles Lakers sticking with the number 1 seed. They have a solid schedule coming up, but their difficulty is in the range of the middle of the pack in terms of the rest of the league, but if they win 3 games, they clinch the number 1 seed, and I think LeBron James and Anthony Davis know how to get the job done. They've been getting it done all year against some of the best teams in the world, and I expect them to have the best chemistry. The Lakers have the best chemistry currently in the NBA, and although it's going to regress a little bit, they're still ahead of everyone else, and I think they're going to keep that their foot on the gas and get that number 1 seed and rest their players for the beginning of the playoffs. Now, here's where things get interesting. I have the LA Clippers maintaining the number 2 seed, and although Denver is about just 1.5 games behind them, Denver does have a much harder schedule than the Clippers, and although Denver has a lot of depth, so do the Clippers, and the Clippers are rested. I think a healthy Paul George, a healthy Kawhi Leonard, not load managing this time around. Keep in mind, Kawhi Leonard load managed to maintain his injury problems, his knees, keep the freshness of his knees alive. Paul George was injured at the start of the season, has been dealing with nagging injuries all throughout. With all of that, the Clippers are fully healthy, and although they haven't maintained a full stretch of chemistry, I think talent-wise they're better than the Denver Nuggets, and that will keep them at the number 2 seed, combined with the fact that they have a much easier schedule. Denver has the 3rd hardest schedule coming into this hiatus. At number 3, I do see Denver retaining that number 3 seed. The top 3 teams are very clear to me. It's the Lakers, the Clippers are in the tier of their own, and then you have a margin, then you have Denver, then you have the Rockets, then you have the Oklahoma Cities of the world, whatever. Now, at the number 4 seed, the Utah Jazz, here's where things get interesting. The Utah Jazz have the current number 4 seed, but Bogdan Bogdanović is out. Mike Conley might leave for the birth of his first child on August 27th. And the chemistry between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell after Donovan Mitchell tested positive for the coronavirus, after Rudy Gobert tested positive for the coronavirus, that could be something to look out for. I think the Jazz have too many things going on with them right now. It's going to be a very tight atmosphere, and I'm not sure they can really get the job done. I think they're going to crumble, and I don't see them maintaining that number 4 seed. Now, who I think is going to take that number 4 seed from them? Houston, Oklahoma City, or Dallas? I'm going to go with my Thunder. And here's the reason I'm going with my Thunder. The Thunder have proven all season long that with their depth, with their leadership, with their coaching, with their team ball style of play, they get the job done about just about anybody. They were one of the hottest teams in the league going into the break. They were at 7-4, but they were winning a lot of games consistently. And I think they're going to build off of that. CP3 has done a phenomenal job. Everyone thought he was washed. He's motivated, on a mission. And although they do have an easier schedule than Houston, and Utah does have an easier schedule than the both of them, I see Oklahoma City, the middle of that pack, just taking that away. And with their depth, with their leadership, with their star power, and Chris Paul, who I believe is the 5th best point guard in the NBA right now, I believe that the Oklahoma City Thunder, with their team ball style player, is going to move up to the number 4 seed. And I have Houston right behind them at a number 5 seed. I might prefer Houston in the playoffs, just a little bit over them because of their star power. But in terms of seeding-wise, I'm going to pick Oklahoma City to take the number 4 seed. And I have Houston right behind them at 5. And I have Utah falling all the way down to 7, behind Dallas. Dallas has a harder schedule than Utah per se. For our SOS, the remaining strength of schedule, Dallas has a harder schedule remaining, but I feel like the Utah Jazz, once again, have too many things going on, while Dallas has a clear chain of command with Rick Carlisle, Luka Doncic, Kristaps Porzingis. They're a much more cohesive unit. Luka Doncic has been phenomenal all season, averaging about 29.99, and he's leading, according to statistics, the Dallas Mavericks are the most highly productive offense of all time. You heard me right. Highest productive offense of all time belongs to the 2019-2020 Dallas Mavericks, and I think they're going to keep building from that. And Luka Doncic is going to lead the way to put them at the 6th seed ahead of Utah. Utah is going to fall to the 7th seed. And who I have falling to the 8th and final seed in the play-in tournament, you might want to go check out my article, which I wrote the other day, who will claim the 8th seed in the Western Conference. I think it is the New Orleans Pelicans, and here's why. New Orleans compared to Memphis, Portland, Sacramento, San Antonio, and Phoenix. Phoenix and San Antonio, in my article, I basically said you could just eliminate them from the equation. Sacramento doesn't have Marvin Bagley, which I think they're going to struggle with. When you have Marvin Bagley, you have a much better chance of matching up against the Jaren Jackson Jr.'s of the world, or the Zion Williamsons of the world, or the Hassan Whitesides. But without Marvin Bagley, you have Richaun Holmes, who's a serviceable option, but Richaun Holmes is not Marvin Bagley, and he can't produce the same way Marvin Bagley does on both ends of the court. Richaun Holmes is a great defender, but he doesn't bring what Marvin Bagley brings on the offensive side of the ball. And when it comes down to Memphis, Portland, and New Orleans, I have Memphis ranked behind New Orleans and Portland because although they have the current 8 seed right now, they have one of the hardest schedules in the NBA remaining, and New Orleans has one of the easiest schedules in the NBA remaining. And Memphis, compared to New Orleans, they're loaded with young talent as well, but they don't quite necessarily carry the same amount of experience. New Orleans is a collection of young talent and experience with like Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram on one hand, then you have Drew Holiday and JJ Redick on the other hand. They carry both of that. And Portland carries the experience, but not necessarily the young talent. Although they have the best player in the battle for the 8 seed in Damian Lillard, and you can't count him out. I would not be surprised if Dame gets the number 8 seed, but if I'm gonna bet on someone to get the number 8 seed based on the strength of their schedule, based on their talent, based on their experience, based on their collection of their young core in a sense, I have to go with New Orleans getting that number 8 seed. Now we're going to predict how the playoffs are going to go. My first round winners are going to be the Milwaukee Bucks beat Washington pretty easily. The Boston Celtics beat Orlando pretty easily. The Toronto Raptors will beat the Indiana Pacers pretty easily. And the Philadelphia 76ers will beat the Miami Heat in a tough series. The hardest round of the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs will be the Philadelphia 76ers versus the Miami Heat. And I have the 76ers winning in 6 because although Miami has a better chemistry and better fit, better leadership, I think Philly's talent is too overwhelming for Miami to necessarily contain. And the problem I have with Miami all year is I'm not concerned with their talent necessarily, but their experience. They have Jimmy Butler, they have Andre Iguodala, they have Jay Crowder, they have some experience, but I think the young guys are not going to handle the pressure very well against a talent-loaded team like Philadelphia with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid just bullying in the paint. And I think Miami's lack of experience is going to cost them when it comes down to key moments, and that's why I have the Philadelphia 76ers beating them in a 6-game series. Now, Boston versus Philadelphia. Milwaukee versus Philadelphia. I have Milwaukee winning in 6. Although Philadelphia has a lot of talent, I feel that Milwaukee had the best record all year. They have the best player in the conference, and they match up very well against the 76ers, and their shooting is going to be too much, and the 76ers just don't work well with each other. And when you're playing a system like Milwaukee that's the best defense in basketball, and you have the lack of spacing to necessarily combat their depth in shooting, I just think it's going to be too much for the 76ers to handle. So give me the Milwaukee Bucks making the conference finals in 6 versus the 76ers. The Boston Celtics versus the Toronto Raptors. And my reasoning is going to be very weird, but I predict the Toronto Raptors are going to win the series, and there's going to be a variety of reasons. Number one, Gordon Hayward might miss a lot of time in that series due to the fact that his wife is expecting a child during that series, and he's announced that he's going to leave the bubble. So that's going to be a key piece for the Boston Celtics gone during that series. Another thing is the Toronto Raptors have that championship experience. They have the championship pedigree. And if the duo of Pascal Siakam and Kyle Lowry outplay Jason Tatum and Kemba Walker, Toronto's going to win easily. Let's say they cancel each other out. I think Toronto's depth and experience is better than Boston's depth and experience. But let's say Boston, Kemba Walker, and Jason Tatum outplay Pascal Siakam and Kyle Lowry. Then I see Boston winning. So this is the closest round and the closest matchup in the second round. But I'm going to go Toronto because I do see both duos kind of counteracting each other out. So they're going to play at the same level, and it comes down to depth. I'm going to pick Toronto's championship experience, their perimeter defense, their devastating wall in the paint. All of that combined, I'm just going to pick the Toronto Raptors based on what I've seen them do in the past. Moving on to the conference finals. I have the Milwaukee Bucks winning in 6. Now, I've heard so much nonsense from so many people disrespecting the Milwaukee Bucks. And let me tell you, it's about crazy. I've heard people saying the Boston Celtics are going to make the finals, the Toronto Raptors are going to make the finals. To hell with that. To hell with that. You know why? It's utterly ridiculous how much disrespect the Milwaukee Bucks are getting right now. The Milwaukee Bucks have been the best team in terms of offensive production and defensive production in the NBA this entire year. And everyone's going to be like, oh, Giannis can't run a half-court offense. And Giannis has had terrible playoff experience. Well, no, he's not necessarily had terrible playoff experience. Last year, he did have a bad series, but it hasn't been the entire playoffs where he's played bad, number one. Number two, where is Kawhi Leonard? Toronto barely beat Milwaukee last year, and every game besides Game 3 and Game 4 were close. And they had Kawhi Leonard going off in that series, scoring 27 in an elimination game to barely beat the Bucks by 6. Where is Kawhi Leonard? I just want to know, how do you replicate that scoring? So I don't see the Toronto Raptors beating them. I don't see Boston Celtics beating them because the Boston Celtics don't necessarily have the same wall Toronto does in the paint. Their best paint defender is probably Daniel Theis, and Daniel Theis cannot contain the likes of Giannis Antetokounmpo or Brook Lopez. So I'm so flattered by all this disrespect going to the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they're pretty easily the best team in the conference, and anyone who doesn't pick them to win the conference is basically just trying to lie to themselves at this point. There's nothing to provide me. There's nothing you could say that will tell me that the Boston Celtics or Toronto Raptors are going to beat the Milwaukee Bucks because it took a superstar, arguably the best player in the game, in Kawhi Leonard to barely get by the Bucks. And not necessarily, the Toronto Raptors don't have that same superstar to replicate the scoring and defense Kawhi Leonard brings, and the Boston Celtics don't have the paint presence to defend Giannis. So I think that's too overwhelming for either of those teams to handle, and that's why I have the Bucks going to the NBA Finals. Let's move on to the Western Conference. Man, the Los Angeles Lakers versus the New Orleans Pelicans in the first round. This is going to be a very entertaining series, but I have the Lakers winning in 5. I think their star power, their experience, their championship pedigree, combined with the fact that Anthony Davis probably wants revenge against his former team. With all that being said, I have the Lakers winning in 5. Zion and those boys will give a good run. They'll make it a lot more entertaining, but when it comes down to it, I have the New Orleans Pelicans' lack of the same amount of experience Los Angeles does playing a factor in that series, and that's why I have the Lakers winning it pretty easily in 5 games. In the second round, in the first round continued, I have the Los Angeles Clippers beating the Jazz in 4 games. And this is pretty easy. I've mentioned the Jazz's struggles previously in this video, but the Jazz have too much going on, and the Los Angeles Clippers are just a better team from every level. They have better coaching, although Quinn Snyder is a great coach. They have better depth. They have better star power. They have a better starting lineup. Mike Conley is probably going to miss the first round due to the birth of his child. All of that plays in. I have the Clippers, who are probably going to maintain the same level of consistency moving on from Utah, who has too many things going on. And Utah's pretty easily going to be eliminated based on whoever they face. But in my prediction and based on my standings, I have the Clippers beating them in 4. I have the Denver. Now, the next matchup is the Denver Nuggets versus the Dallas Mavericks, and here's where things get very interesting. Denver, I don't know really how to go about predicting this series. Denver, in an actual occasion, they would have home court advantage, and I would easily pick them, but they don't have that. Their home court advantage is the best home court advantage in the NBA due to their altitude and the fact that they're accustomed to playing in that altitude, while the other teams have to kind of battle much harder than Denver necessarily does in their home atmosphere. And I would have picked them pretty easily, but I'm probably still going to pick them to win that series, but it's going to go to 7 games. I think Luka Doncic is that type of talent. He's going to push the Denver Nuggets, led by Nikola Jokic, to 7, highest ranked offense of all time. I think him, Kristaps, combined with Rick Carlisle's championship experience in terms of coaching, I think all of that factors in. They're going to give Denver a run for their money. It's going to go to 7 games, but when it comes down to it, I think the better team is Denver on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And I think Nikola Jokic is going to, and Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr., who's my X factor, are going to push Denver past Dallas in a tough-fought series. Oklahoma City versus Houston. Houston is one of those teams. I am going to pick Houston to win the series, and I'm going to pick them to win in 6, but tell me, I know you guys all probably know about the Houston Rockets by now. Tell me, would you actually be surprised if they lost to Oklahoma City? Would you actually be surprised? Think about that. Would you actually be in shock if Houston lost to Oklahoma City in the first round? I wouldn't. I wouldn't be shocked at all. I could actually see it happening pretty easily in my imagination. Russell Westbrook and James Harden have had pretty terrible playoff experiences when it comes down to late game crunches, and with all that factored in, I wouldn't really be surprised, but I'm going to pick the Houston Rockets in 6. I have to put that faith in Westbrook and Harden to get it done, because if they don't, it's probably good. It's just borderline embarrassing at this point if they don't get the job done against a team that isn't as talented as they are, doesn't have 2 arguably top 10 players. So I think the Houston Rockets have to beat Oklahoma City in the first round, but I would not be surprised if Oklahoma City beats Houston at all. Moving on to the second round in the Western Conference, the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Houston Rockets. Give me the Lakers in 5. Like I've said before, Russell Westbrook and James Harden, their play styles have not worked all year. People could say what they want about small ball, but if you actually look at the advanced stats, Russell Westbrook has been a net negative on the court. The team gets better when he leaves the court, even when he's been playing well. They're much more effective when James Harden's at his best, and that's not going to happen because small ball doesn't give James Harden the opportunity to create lobs for Clint Capella or a big man who would ideally be in that situation. Instead, Russell Westbrook gets to dominate in the paint, which is what benefits James Harden the most. And when the offense is not the most effective around James Harden, they're not very effective at all. So see the Los Angeles Lakers taking advantage of that. Also, they've added other shooters like J.R. Smith and Deion Waiters that's going to open up the paint for LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Who's going to guard LeBron James and Anthony Davis in the paint for the Houston Rockets? They don't have anyone to guard them. That's why I see the Lakers winning pretty easily in 5. Just their experience, their size, their physicality, along with other role players are going to create so much more opportunities for LeBron and AD in the paint. The Clippers versus the Nuggets. I have the Clippers winning in 6. And although both teams have a lot of depth, both teams have a somewhat amount of star power, the Clippers' depth is greater than the Nuggets' depth. They're more experienced. The Clippers also have better star power in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. The Clippers also have probably more experience coaching in Doc Rivers, who's won a championship before, although Mike Malone is a very good head coach himself. And in every facet of the game, the Clippers just beat the Nuggets in. And I have the Clippers just beating the Nuggets because they outweigh them in everything, and I believe that Kawhi Leonard, with his experience, with his championship mentality, is going to take them past them pretty easily. The Battle of LA starts now. Lakers Clippers, everyone wants to talk about this. Let's get right into it. Right now, and this is subject to change, right now, I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Lakers, and here's why. The Los Angeles Lakers have better chemistry than the Los Angeles Clippers. I believe when Anthony Davis is at his best. In the first 2 games, I was at Christmas Day. I saw Anthony Davis change his play style to something that he is not. He was taking a bunch of mid-range shots, a bunch of fadeaway shots, and that's not who he is. But in the latest matchup against the Los Angeles Clippers in March, I saw a different AD. The same AD we're accustomed to seeing on a night-in, night-out basis. He didn't care about the fadeaway shots. He didn't take a lot of high-volume three-point shots or fadeaway shots, which made him very inefficient in those first 2 games. He was aggressive. He was battling with Montrezl Harrell in the paint, Ivica Zubac. He was just bullying his way, scored 30 points, and if AD continues to do that, no one on the Clippers can guard him. No one on the Clippers can guard him. They know that. LeBron knows that. Frank Vogel knows that. Everyone in the gym would know that Anthony Davis is unguardable from the Clippers standpoint. And if you keep feeding him the ball, if he keeps dominating in the post, that's going to be a very easy series. It's not going to be an easy series by any means for the Lakers. Let me take that back. But it's going to be much easier for them to take advantage of that. Plus, they added the role players. That allows him more flexibility in the paint. But I also believe that LeBron James is the best player in the world. Kawhi Leonard currently is the second best player in the world when healthy. Well, I think Steph Curry and Kevin Durant are better when they're healthy, but right now, Steph Curry and Kevin Durant are not playing. Kawhi Leonard's the second best player, and I think LeBron James is experienced, and his play all season has proven that he's a better player than Kawhi Leonard, and that I think that's going to show in this series. And keep in mind, Paul George, the second option for the Los Angeles Clippers, has had terrible playoff experience, and I'm not sure what I'm going to get from him. Maybe as a second option, he'll rise to the occasion, but we've seen him crumble too many times that we can't really tell. So until I get a real sample size, I can't put my money on the Clippers because although they're probably a better team on talent, they're a better talented team on paper with their depth, with their coaching, with their star power, with their reigning Finals MVP. I just think the Lakers' chemistry combined with their positive experience with the best player in basketball and another top 5 player arguably is going to be too much for the Clippers to handle, especially when Anthony Davis gets down in the paint. The Los Angeles Lakers versus the Milwaukee Bucks. I have the Los Angeles Lakers winning the NBA Finals, and here's why. The Los Angeles Lakers have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and I know that the Milwaukee Bucks have Giannis, and they won a game during the season. But when it comes down to it, Giannis Antetokounmpo, like my fellow TWSN analyst Daniel Alameda has said before, he cannot necessarily run a half-court offense against the elite teams with an elite superstar. The reason I have him winning the Eastern Conference pretty easily is because no one's standing in his way. But the Los Angeles Lakers is a different story. You have arguably one of the best defenders in the NBA in Anthony Davis, who's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year, who's going to be matched up against Giannis Antetokounmpo. LeBron James has increased his defensive tenacity. We all know what extra gear he kicks it up to come playoff time, come finals time. We've seen his elite defense on the brightest stage. And I think the Lakers' star power, combined with their added depth, which they've signed in Dion Waiters and J.R. Smith, and the role players like Alex Caruso is going to get increased minutes on defense because of the absence of Avery Bradley, is really going to help them elevate past the Milwaukee Bucks. And the Milwaukee Bucks are going to make it a battle. It's going to be 6 games, but I think the Lakers' star power is just too much for the Bucks to handle, and that is why the Los Angeles Lakers will be your NBA champions. That's it for this episode. If you have any thoughts, comments, concerns, as always, make sure to go tweet me at SWDTweets1. Make sure to go follow at Sports with Debates for the latest updates in the sports world and latest in-depth analysis. And that's going to be it for this episode. I'm out for now, y'all. Peace.